My name's Lisa Jackson. I'm a Runner's World columnist and I also write for Women's Running magazine. I'm also the author of 3 running books, Running Made Easy, which was published over 20 years ago now, Your Pace or Mine, which has just been re-released as a 10th anniversary edition. And my latest book has just come out, and that's called Still Running After All These Tears, A Runner's Journey Through Grief. I'm based in sunny Worthing.
And have you always been a runner? Did you run as a little
Yeah.
girl? Did you come from like a running family?
I can say I came from a running family, but I certainly didn't run as a little girl. In fact, I absolutely hated sport. I was the academic one in my family. My sister was the sporty one. And I went on a 5K fun run when I was 10 on a Formula One racetrack. And I really enjoyed that, being waved across the finish line with a checkered flag. That really appealed to me. But then I didn't run that kind of distance for another 20 years. So what happened was my dad was a cross-country champion. My mum took up jogging, as they called it in those days, and they used to nag me into going for a 2K run every day. And I used to pretend that I'd done it by stuffing a book up my T-shirt, going to the end of our driveway, hiding between 2 parked cars, and then sprinting up our very long driveway to get a bit of a sweat up and then telling them I'd done my daily run. So they did nag me about the running. I didn't like it. I didn't want to run. And I always associated running with hot-faced humiliation. I just didn't enjoy team sports because, number one, I was really slow as a runner, and number two, contact sports absolutely terrified me. It took a very long time for me to become a runner, but it was turning 30 and then realizing that my life was at a crossroads. I could either continue just gaining more weight, feeling really unfit, or I could walk in the footsteps of my parents, who sometimes cracked out a half marathon before breakfast when we were on holiday. So a colleague of mine, just coincidentally at the time, invited me to a 5K race for life, which I attended. And when I saw everyone dressed in pink, which is my favorite color, I noticed you are very keen on pink as well, especially the shade of pink I like in particular, that deep pink. I went along and everyone was cheering everybody on. It wasn't competitive at all. As whereas before, I literally would come sort of half a field behind other people on sports day. And all of a sudden, I was just among other women and we were all just supportive of each other. So that was a real game changer for me. And then my aunt, who also lived in England, because I'm originally from South Africa, she'd also married an Englishman. She said to me, I've entered the Great North Run. Why don't you enter too? And I was just like, almost spat out my coffee. It's like me. But the word marathon in the word Great North Run, half marathon, just really appealed to me. And my aunt was also a bit of a nag. So I actually entered and I couldn't believe that I got in. So I ran the Great North Run. It was an incredible experience with my aunt. We were so naive of everything we did wrong. I mean, we ran in vest tops, and we were so freezing. I had to finish it with my hands held under my armpits to keep warm. My aunt was blue with cold. I remember one of the race snacks. We were so desperate. We didn't take any race nutrition. One of the race snacks someone offered us was an ice lolly. It was like, oh my God, it's just the one thing I don't want to eat right now. But we ate it anyway because, we needed the sugar. So that was an incredible experience. And then my aunt had been trying to get into the London Marathon for many years, I think 6 years, and hadn't got in. And all of a sudden, a colleague of mine at the magazine I worked on said to me she was injured and would I like her place? And I said, of course, but are you sure? And she said, absolutely, I can see your passion for running. So I got a place. My aunt got a charity place. We did London together. And of course, I said never again at the end. And then a little while later, I thought, I actually want to do another marathon just because I had to walk half of London. I did it in just under 7 hours because I was injured. So I thought, okay, I'll enter Edinburgh later that year. And in Edinburgh, I ran all the way. But I had a horrendous experience. It was just groaning in pain virtually, from the halfway mark. I was just groaning and grunting till the finish line, and I couldn't walk properly for 3 weeks afterwards. And then a really life-changing thing happened in my next marathon in Paris because I was injured again. I was so worried about not finishing. I read in the race brochure that you should try a walk-running strategy, which is actually how I started running in the first place when I started to seriously train. And I thought, I'll just give it a go. And I managed to finish Paris 10 minutes faster than I'd finished Edinburgh, where I'd run all the way. And my recovery was only 3 days rather than 3 weeks. And that was a big relief to me because the pain I was in after Edinburgh was so severe that I thought I might end up in a wheelchair if I carried on running, marathons. By the time I was 40, I thought I'd be in a wheelchair. So I suddenly noticed that my body recovered much more quickly. I enjoyed the race much more. I was in control the whole way. I was actually able to run the last 12 kilometers of Paris. And so that led to me writing a book with a colleague of mine at the magazine called Running Made Easy. And in that, we popularized walk running, which had already been popularized in America. And we were only vaguely aware of Jeff Galloway. But we published the book. It was a really fun, bite-sized training tips, colorful illustrations book, more like a magazine format than a serious running book. And that has, done incredibly well. It sold over 120,000 copies. And that's actually helped a lot of people in the UK to run. People like myself who felt they were too old, too unfit, too, overweight, and too non-sporty to run. So that was incredible. And that's made me want to continue writing about running. So my next book was Your Pace or Mine. And in that, it detailed my journey to try and get into the 100 Marathon Club. So I launched my book, Your Pace or Mine, at my 100th marathon at the Foulmead Country Park near Dover. And that was where we left things. But 18 months later, my husband was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. And I'd already said, I wouldn't be running that many marathons because I'd done 28 marathons in 2015. And I just said, I can't leave my husband at home. Even though he was a marathon runner, he really didn't like marathon running. And I just thought, I'm not going to leave him alone every weekend to go off on my little adventures. So I'd already said, I wanted to stay married and I was going to cut back my marathons. But when my husband was diagnosed, my marathon running just fell off a cliff because I just couldn't justify spending that time away from him. And I just didn't have the fight in me anymore to fight, the pain and to get through to the end of the finish lines of marathons because I was spending my waking life and actually my sleeping life as well because I kept waking up to think about it, fighting cancer, fighting for my husband's life. But I learned a lot of really interesting things because I'm a researcher, because I'm also, a journalist, while my husband was ill. So I learned a lot about cancer. I learned a lot about mindset during cancer. I learned how to deal with medical professionals, etc. And I just thought it would be such a pity for all that hard-won wisdom to go to waste. So I kind of describe what I did as turning wounds into wisdom. So I started thinking I need to write another book which shares all this knowledge with other people. And running played, a very important role during my husband's illness because it helped me to process what was happening. It was a respite from thinking about cancer. I mean, sometimes it was like, thinking about the pain in my legs blotted out the pain in my heart. I'm thinking I was going to lose my soulmate because I'd been married to Graham. Well, I ended up being married to him for 30 years and I'd known him for 35. So I put everything in my book, including my loss of running mojo, which also happened. And then I just hope that my book will show people that even people who've done 109 marathons and 256-mile ultras like I have can lose their running mojo. I've given them tips on how to get it back. And I've also given them a roadmap through trauma, through grief, and through terminal illness. And I never read a book like that. I mean, I read many, many books where sometimes I only found one sentence that was helpful. So I've tried to distill everything I learned into one book. So my book is a story, but at the back, in the epilogue, there's a handy summary of all the life lessons that people can refer to if they need help in a challenging situation. So my book isn't just for people who have a loved one who's going on a cancer journey. It isn't just about grief. It's actually for every kind of situation in life that's very challenging, like divorce, redundancy, those kind of things.
Oh my gosh, amazing. Lisa, thank you so much for sharing up all of that. It gives us just such a great insight into your own sort of running journey, like the highs and the lows and the challenges. And there's so many words which have jumped out at me and so many topics that I want to delve into. And I suppose one of them is around that sort of running, but linked in, I suppose, with the trauma and the grief and that loss of running mojo. Obviously running is something that you've used throughout your whole life, and then suddenly not having that energy or that desire to do it anymore. I'd love to hear more about the balancing out of the running while you're going through a lot of trauma and dealing with, a loved one's cancer diagnosis and just going through all of those experiences. And I suppose trying to balance out your needs to not escape, but to get outside, clear your mind, refresh, and just do something sort of different.
You know, if I look back, the one lesson that I really learned was I shouldn't have let running go as much as I did. I'm a really goal-orientated person. I love round numbers. So that's why originally, I was only going to do 5 marathons, then I was going to do 10. Then I love the round number of 100. I also wanted to visit 100 countries, which I've now done, and I now want to visit every country on earth. I'm that kind of person. I need to have goals. And when my husband was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer, goals went out the window. I didn't have any goals except keeping him alive and happy as long as I possibly could. And that was, it really was a loss, another loss in my life. But I just couldn't focus on myself anymore. It wasn't about me. It was about my husband. And I think that's something I wish I hadn't let go of, but at the time I just didn't have the fight in me. So unfortunately, I turned to comfort eating. I think I ate more junk food. I mean, things like KFC, which before I'd probably eaten once every 5 years, I now craved, or things like sticky ribs that you stick in the oven. I mean, we were eating food, as I call it, with pictures on it. We just never ate food like that normally. We ate proper, healthy meat and 2 veg type of things. And I comfort ate. I drank, a lot of wine. I ate South African marshmallow Easter eggs. And what I really should have done was say, even if you don't have a lot of fights in you, you have enough energy to do a 10-minute run. So I do regret that. I do regret that running really took a backseat, but not, I didn't not run. I just ran much less frequently than I should have. I did actually go on walks, funnily enough, during lockdown, especially. There was no way that I wasn't going to make full use of my 1 hour of walking for a day. I really did head out the door every day, but I didn't introduce running into many of those walks. I just walked, and I now know, I realize that I would have felt so much better even if I'd done a 5-minute walk as part of that 1 hour walk. Sorry, 5-minute run as part of that 1 hour walk. So what happened with my running mojo was when Graham was ill, my husband, I heard a voice saying very loudly, running will be your salvation. Like, it was, honestly, there's something called an auditory hallucination. And I think this was one of those things. It just said it as if someone was standing right next to me. I think it was in the middle of the night. It said, running will be your salvation. And I held on to that. And I did use running when I was extremely angry with some of the things that my husband's medical staff did, the way they behaved, the mistakes they were making. I really did use it for those things, but I didn't run regularly. And then when I moved to Worthing, so I'd lived in Croydon for 27 years, a week after my husband died, I put in an offer on a flat down here in Worthing, where I now live, right by the seafront. And when I came to Worthing, I remembered the words, running will be your salvation. And I started running to a hot yoga class in town, which is only about a mile away. And I managed to get to the yoga class okay. But what I found was on my way back, I just couldn't start running again. Now, I've always been able to run 2K, at the drop of a hat. I mean, even when I was a child, even, at any time in my life, I've never, ever not been able to run 2K. And I just found it terrifying. I was on the seafront, on the promenade, and I kept saying, okay, all right, let's just run the next lamppost. And then I thought, I just can't. I'm going to have to walk all the way home. So I don't know if it was long COVID. I don't know if I had COVID. I don't know what happened to me, but it was terrifying. I just found my running I just couldn't run anymore. And that was very frightening because obviously I rely on it as a stress management tool, as a head clearing tool, as a creative tool. And instead, at the yoga class, I was not able to keep up with the yoga class. I did a lot of just hinging forwards. And when I got home one day, I hinged forward and I couldn't stand up again. So I was bent double like a boomerang. And thank goodness that day I'd already organized a visit to an osteopath. So I went there by taxi because I couldn't drive. And she just looked at my face, which was just absolutely racked with pain. I've never been in so much pain in my life. And she said, I'm really sorry to have to tell you this, but the 2 marathons you've entered this year, there's no way you're going to be able to run them, and you're going to have to stop running for quite a while. So I did stop running, obviously, and thank goodness she helped me very much. In just that one session, I was able to stand upright again. And then when I decided that it was time to resume running after a few months, I just realized I had to reset and recalibrate my expectations of myself, that I was no longer a person who could just knock out a marathon every second weekend or every weekend. I was no longer the person who would run 56 miles in the Comrades Marathon in South Africa. I was someone who couldn't run between two lampposts. So I set myself a very small target of running a mile. And the amazing thing was, the day that I went out, on my way back, so I'd done half a mile, I looked out to sea, and one of the wind turbines in Rampion Wind Farm was slowly turning, and it had the end of a rainbow attached to it. So it looked as if the rainbow was powering the turbine. And I just felt this was a sign from the universe that I was doing the right thing, that I was starting a brand new life and rebuilding my life in Worthing, but that running would be a massive part of that. So I kept going. I ran a park run. I then ran a half marathon in the New Forest, and I built up gradually until last year. I ran my first marathon in 7 years, the Brighton Marathon. And I had a small pouch of my husband's ashes in my bum bag. And my goal was to finish. That was my only goal. And then I wanted to scatter those ashes in the ocean. I chose Brighton because it's a relatively flat course. I've done it many times before, and I love it. And also, my husband ran half of the Brighton Marathon with me once. He often, did marathons with me, but he didn't run beside me because he was much faster. So there were many memories along the course of my husband talking to me and telling me not to carry on speeding up every time someone called out my name and cheered for me. He said, your running's very, very inconsistent. You're speeding up, slowing down, speeding up, slowing down. You need to run at a consistent pace. So I had many happy memories of him running with me. Obviously, that made Brighton 2025 a lot more emotional. I was in floods of tears at the start, and I was in floods of tears at the finish. But I asked my husband to take care of me during the course, and he did. I passed a block of flats, and they had the same, very similar name to the block of flats he'd lived in Cape Town when we were students. I looked up, and one of the shop fronts had 3 massive flamingos on it, which I felt were a cheer squad sent to me by my husband, because I always run nowadays in a flamingo hat. So that's why my column in Runner's World is called The Flamingo Diaries. And I just felt that was my personalized cheer squad sent by my husband. And then finally, he sent me a runner who also had experience of cancer because his wife had breast cancer. And that runner, Peter, got me through the few final miles. He'd actually been listening to Your Pace or Mine on audiobook the night before and throughout his trainings. I said, that's a real pity because now you know all my best stories. But what it gave me an opportunity to do was hear his stories. And he's an incredible man. And I said to him at the end of it, his dream was to run London. The London Marathon. And I said, Peter, I'm going to do everything I can to help you do that. So I said, I'll sponsor you. So I would have sponsored him for Brighton, but I said, no, I'm going to save my sponsorship for next year. I'm going to send you fundraising tips. I'm going to get right behind you. And I'm going to see what I can do to get you a place. And he applied to loads of charities, but one of my friends in the 100 Marathon Club has a small charity, the Chloe Bigmore Trust, and he put up a note about wanting someone to run for his charity. And I put the two of them in touch, and Peter achieved his dream of getting into London. So now, of course, I have to go and repay the favor that Peter did for me by turning up on the course just to support him. Obviously, we'll be sponsoring him. And the most remarkable thing about Peter is that his surname is Rook. And after my husband died, I'd already asked him before he died whether he would send me a sign that he was around, and the sign he chose to send me was crows. And my sister sent me an article on crows, and she said, my goodness, that is definitely Graham's spirit animal, because crows are very intelligent. They can use tools, and they mate for life. And they also have a very bird's eye view on things. They don't react to things emotionally. They are very rational in their approach to life, which perfectly summed up my husband. So he sent me a man with a surname of Rook, and rooks are part of the corvid family, which crows are as well. So I just thought if ever there was a sign from the universe that my husband was with me that day, that was it.
Oh, Lisa, I've got tears in my eyes.
It was just unbelievable. And to talk to someone who'd gone through the cancer journey, because Peter was also a cancer thriver's partner, like myself. So we just had so much in common, knowing what it was like to have that terrible fear of losing the woman you love, most in the world. And Peter actually couldn't go on honeymoon because his wife Dominique, developed cancer just before that. So, we were just meant to be. It was a person who understood me and where I was coming from, and who had beautiful stories to tell. I mean, I do love a good love story, and just such a lovely, supportive, enthusiastic man. So, yeah, I mean, I couldn't have found a better running partner for those final agonizing miles. And by the way, they didn't turn agonizing. After that, the agony was gone. I was just having fun again. It was just wonderful.
I mean, your book, titled, Still Running After All These Tears. Like, I can't even imagine, God, the tears, the emotions, the highs and the lows. And I know tears can be seen as like a negative thing, but also sometimes it's just like a release of emotion, isn't it? And
Absolutely.
I suppose, how was it for you, writing your last book, Still Running After All These Tears, which is like a survival manual, putting it down on paper, almost not reliving, but having to, to relive or experience these memories again.
Well, I definitely had to relive those memories because I couldn't write about them unless I relived them in, intense detail. Writing about them, I had to take people into hospice rooms, or to my husband's deathbed, or to my father's deathbed, or to the day that I heard my sister had died. So yeah, I had to relive all of them. It's the most difficult book I've ever had to write. Obviously, it was intensely personal. So you do feel very vulnerable exposing yourself and your reactions to things. And there were some days I could only work on the book for a couple of hours because I cried so much, or I just felt so drained by it that I just had to go and sleep for the entire afternoon. It was an incredibly challenging experience, but it was also incredibly cathartic. I think it really helped me to release those tears. I think tears are very healing and very necessary. So it was a grueling process. And what I found very interesting as well, which is why I'm such a keen supporter of dignity in dying, which campaigns for assisted dying, is that I've been with Graham for 35 years, my entire adult life, from when I was 18 till 53. And I really struggled to remember anything happy about our marriage, which was crazy because we were laughing all the time. He genuinely was my soulmate. He was the kindest, most supportive, most fun, mischievous person to be around. And I couldn't remember a single thing of why I loved him or nice things we'd done together. I mean, we traveled to over 100 countries together. I couldn't remember any memories like that. Whereas with my dad, because Graham had a very painful death, so that was, it traumatized me, to be honest. The pain he was in at the end was just unspeakable. And he actually begged to die. And he said, you wouldn't treat an animal like this. Whereas with my father, who had dementia, and also he had prostate cancer, which had spread to his pelvis. So he was going to get the kind of bone pain that affected Graham so terribly. My father had a peaceful death. He actually caught COVID, as did I. And he just slipped into unconsciousness, was kept pain-free by his amazing GP. And then he just passed away, with no pain. And with my dad, I was so easily able to access all the happy memories because my dad, again, was an incredibly supportive father, really encouraged me to run, encouraged my academic career, encouraged me in all aspects of my life. But I found it so easy to remember good things about him, whereas with Graham, I couldn't remember anything. So the book actually became a tribute to Graham because without it, I would still be sitting here with a blank mind, just thinking, why did I love this man so deeply? So that's why I support assisted dying, because it isn't just about the experience of the person who's dying. And obviously, it's just terrible for them if they have to die in pain. And unfortunately, the end of life charity Marie Curie says that a third of people suffer overwhelming pain in the final week of their life. So it's an incredibly common experience for dying people. But it's not just about how awful it is for that poor dying person who's helpless lying in that hospice or hospital bed. It's actually about the people that are left behind, because we are left with these awful memories overlapping everything that we loved spending time with that person, the things we did with that person. So it's everyone benefits with assisted dying. And that's why I campaign, so actively. I attend the demos. I write features about the subject, because I think if people knew more about death and the realities of death, which is something we don't like to talk about, they would all be supporting the assisted dying bill that's going through the House of Lords at the moment.
So what stage is that at now? Is it just waiting to be approved, or are there more levels to it?
Well, there were over 1,000 amendments proposed in the House of Lords, and that's being debated at the moment. They're going through each one, and sometimes, some of the amendments are things like you have to have lived in this country, for 12 months before you ask for assisted dying, etc. I mean, they are really obscure amendments that just, many people are saying are just a way to slow down the bill and see if they can make it take so long that it doesn't get passed. So, I really believe that the safeguards should be in place and we should make time to debate things. But there's several lords are saying that this is just an attempt to derail the bill. So it's got through to the House of Lords, and I'm absolutely praying that it goes through, because the day that it was passed in the House of Commons, I was at a demonstration outside the Houses of Parliament, and the emotion that I experienced that day was just overwhelming, and I almost feel I can't go through that again. I just can't. But I will. If it's necessary, you should see the dedication. There are people there who have been campaigning for assisted dying for decades. David Dimbleby was there. Prue Leith was there. Esther Ranson, the amazing Esther Ranson, she's still campaigning from her deathbed for this bill to be passed, because she knows that it's giving people choice. I mean, no one will be bullied into accepting assisted dying. You can say you want to do it and then change your mind. And in fact, many people do. Once they have that reassurance that they are not going to die in pain, many people don't use that option. They just die naturally. So it's just something that I feel so important, because I've been now at 3 deathbeds actually. And so I don't fear death, but I do fear dying. And I don't want to live the rest of my life like fearing how my life is going to end, and that my life might end, a very good chance that my life end, if I'm the unlucky 1 in 3, of dying in intolerable pain.
When you said, talking about death and dying is just it's almost just so uncomfortable. It's almost like,
Mm.
I don't necessarily know why that is. It's just a reality, and sometimes you think it's just, well, it's just so far away. Let's not think about it. But I think it's one of those things like, as you start getting older, you start, losing more people. It's suddenly like, no, this is a reality. Like, what sort of conversations had maybe you and your husband had around death and dying, and even, you know, planning for the future, or how things were meant to be? Like, were those conversations that you had before he got ill, or were those conversations that you needed to have because he got ill?
I think we both didn't want to talk about death before he got ill. We were both healthy. We took our health seriously before we started eating the sticky ribs. We took our health very seriously. We ate really well. We moved, we ran. I think death felt like something very far away. I think we both thought we'd live well into our 80s. So death was not something we talked about a lot at all. And then when he was diagnosed, we went away for a weekend, and we actually used the questions in the back of a book called Mind Over Medicine by an American doctor called Dr. Lisa Rankin. And those were more about things about making peace with our lives. So we just said, are there any hurts that we've done to each other that we need to forgive? Is there anything that we want to change about our lives going forward? Because we didn't know how long he had to live, although he was given a prognosis of 18 months to 5 years. And we just had this really full and frank discussion. It was very helpful to have those questions. But in terms of how he wants to die, dying, those kind of subjects, we didn't talk about them because we took a decision to live in hope, not fear. And I wish we'd had those discussions, but we didn't have the courage to have them. And that's why I say to people, have those conversations, over dinner. Have those conversations when you're going on a walk, because they're not emotionally fraught. And having them at that point when terminal illness or anything like that is not on the horizon is so much easier than when you are facing death in the face. Because I just felt a discussion about where would you like to die, how would you like to die, what are you scared of, etc., would have undermined our policy of we live in hope, not fear. So I genuinely thought my husband would live at least 10 years because I found him, the best surgeon in Europe, if not the world, who had an incredibly high success rate. But unfortunately, with my husband, his cancer went to his brain, which only happens in 3% of mesothelioma cancer patients. So mesothelioma is an asbestos-related lung cancer, and it's such a remote possibility, 3%. We didn't even consider it, and unfortunately, Graham fell into that 3%. So, when he was in the hospice, he said he wanted to die, and so, I knew that he would have wanted assisted dying at that point. And, what's really unfortunate about the current situation is that you have to go to Switzerland to get help from, organizations such as Dignitas, but you have to be well enough to fly. Now, my husband worked full time until a month before his death. He walked around. He went to visit the hospice, I think 2 weeks before he went into the hospice. He walked in there on his own 2 feet. And at that time, his pain wasn't intolerable. So we would have had to fly to Switzerland and perhaps end his life much earlier than he would have wanted or needed just to be able to avail ourselves of Dignitas. Also, it cost £15,000. So, it's an enormous amount of money to find at short notice to give yourself the option of a pain-free death. So I'm encouraging people to have these conversations, and there's information in my epilogue in my book of ways to start this conversation. There's organizations that will give you a lot of help with this. Marie Curie is one of them. And just talk about what your wishes are. I mean, after my husband died, one of the first things I did was write a living will. And I wrote down all my fears and I wrote down all my wishes about how I wanted to be treated if I became incapacitated. And I had to sign a do not resuscitate order on my husband while he was in the hospice. And if you'd asked me even a year before or 5 months before, would you ever sign one of those? I'd say, no, I love my husband. I want to keep him alive as long as possible. But when you find out that it's a remote possibility that someone who is resuscitated will ever be able to leave the hospice or the hospital, and that it's actually just prolonging their suffering, I think people would be much more inclined to sign it, as I was. So now, I have a DNR clause in my living will, and my friends are really aware of all my fears surrounding death, of how I don't want to go through the same grueling process that my poor husband had to endure. So I think I wish I'd spoken to my husband. Even with my father, we never discussed death because I didn't tell my dad that he had dementia, and I didn't tell my dad, well, it was a choice in our family. I didn't tell my dad that he had prostate cancer because I just thought, why does he need to live these final days living in fear, or final weeks or months living in fear? So I didn't tell him. And I can honestly say to you, it's the best decision I ever made. My dad was the most content I'd ever seen him in the final months of his life, because I went out to South Africa to care for him. He was so content. He was so happy. He just radiated love towards me, and I just radiated love towards him. But I also knew that my dad really supported my uncle, who had mouth cancer, when he decided not to have surgery, which would have removed half his jaw. And he also supported my uncle's decision not to have chemotherapy. So I knew what my dad's, views were on that, but in terms of other people, not his own wishes. And I think I still felt, at the time really guilty, but then I just thought, no, I know what I'm talking about because I've witnessed Graham's death, and I'm not letting my dad have a death like that. So we didn't take my dad to hospital when he got COVID. His GPs have said, well, the only thing we would do differently in a hospice compared to a care home is intubate your dad. And you've said to me, you don't want to prolong his suffering. And I said, no, I know that the bone cancer pain that my dad will be experiencing, without doubt, very shortly, is going to be intolerable. And I don't want to put him through that. So I think everyone should be having these conversations, and just in a happy way, like just thinking, how can we make sure that we have a good death? I think Chinese people wish you a good death. And you think, what a morbid thing to say. But I'm telling you, the way I live my life now, that is my most ardent wish, is to have a good death. And actually, I just live my life now with a sense of urgency. I actually always have. But I talk about death a lot now. I did this. I went on a hike in the mountains in Nepal. And I said, because I don't have that much time left. And people go, Lisa, come on. You're only 57. At the time, I was 57. I was like, no, but I'm just aware that time is short, and that anything in my life that I've always meant to do or want to do, I just get on with it and do it. And I think everyone should lead their lives like that, because, as everyone always says, tomorrow is never guaranteed.
Absolutely. And because we are talking about death, what does a good death look like for you?
I'm now a widow, And the most terrifying thing for me is the thought of dying alone. So a good death is having someone hold your hand. And if I don't have a family member who's able to do that at the end, I'm going to employ a death doula to come and sit with me, because I just think it's a journey that you want to go on with someone holding your hand, just like birth. Death needs company. So a good death to me is having someone hold my hand, dying on my own terms when I feel that I've had enough of life. And don't get me wrong, I absolutely embrace life. I absolutely love life. I do think I lead my life, at 100 miles an hour. I'm always doing things I love and am passionate about. But when it's time to go, I want to be able to go on my own terms and not be in pain. I want to be able to die at home. And very few people get that chance, although most people say they prefer to die at home. There's a very low percentage of people who actually do. So I'd like to die at home in my own bed, surrounded by my own beautiful paintings, with loved one or loved ones beside me, and having been spared weeks or months of intolerable pain. And I don't think anyone else can judge when your time is up. I think it's our own personal decision. So I would like to have been able to decide when the pain is too much. And with my husband, there were many months, I think it was almost 2 years before he died, we had bouts of what they call breakthrough pain, where the pain was intolerable, but only for a few minutes or, perhaps an hour. It was still terrible, but he definitely wanted to continue living after that. But it finally got to the point where there was more pain than there was non-pain. And that's when death was the only option. So that's a good death is something where you've also had the chance to make peace with everyone around you. You've told everyone you love them. And actually, I do that every day now. If there's anyone that comes into my mind and I think, oh my goodness, you've been such a good friend to me. I just love your thoughtfulness. I just love your kindness. I'll never forget when you did X for me, whether it was today or last week or 10 years ago. I just leave a voice note for that person, or I write them a little email or send them a card. So I do think a good death is when there's not one person who hasn't been told that you love them. There's not one person that hasn't been forgiven. I think that would be the way I'd like to go.
Thank you for sharing that. And obviously we've talked a lot about death, which is uncomfortable, but it's good. It definitely makes you think. And I suppose on the flip side of that is, you know, living a good life, because you are still so young. There's still so much that I know that you want to do, that you want to achieve. And what does that look like for you? What do you hope to be doing in the future? Especially with regards to running and travel, and what does that look like?
Well, I realized that I need goals, and without them, you can get very tempted to say, oh, I really have to iron my underwear. I really have to dust my flat. So I've decided to try and visit every country on earth, which might be a bit of a dangerous mission. So I'm trying to be sensible about it, but it's a lovely goal to have. Whether I achieve it or not doesn't really matter. As they say, it's the journey, it's not the destination. So that's a major goal for me. So I'm going to Libya in a couple of months' time. I pulled out of going there before because I signed up at 3:00 in the morning one night, and then I decided I was too scared to go, so I had to cancel the trip. But now I've decided I'm going to go just for 3 days. And I just love traveling. It broadens the mind. You meet such incredible people. You learn so much. I mean, that's the time when I really expand my knowledge of the world, is visiting countries. So, with Iran in the news at the moment, I went to Iran with my husband actually while he was ill. And we just had the most incredible 2 weeks there. So I know those people. I feel their pain. I know how underneath everything, they're really modern society. They're one of the most ancient civilizations in the world. I've met them. I've heard them whisper to me, I hope you realize we are not like our government. So, I care more about the world because I've been to so many places. So travel is a major one for me. I've been to all the kind of tame countries, so it is the wilder ones that I'm going to be going to next. Also, in terms of running, I never want running to slip from my grasp again. So I am running the Brighton Marathon again this year. I'm going to do at least one marathon a year going forward. I might actually do 2 as of next year, just because once you've done the training, you might as well, do another one just for good measure. I also want to get to doing 100 park runs. That's another goal of mine. And also 100, you can see I like my round numbers, 100 half marathons, because I'm at, I think, 47 now. So it's a lovely distance because it's double the fun and half the pain. And then something else that's a kind of vague goal that I kind of keep promising myself is to do a half Ironman. I don't think I'd be able to do a full Ironman. Never say never, but I don't think that that's something that's going to be doable. But I would love to do a half Ironman. I have the ideal training ground here in Worthing because I have a cycle path that's flat that I can train on without risking my life every time I jump on a bike because I'm very unstable on a bike. I've got the sea to swim in and I've got hills to run on. So I think a half Ironman might be something I do in my 60s. I know there are people like Ian Gran who have done, this even older in their 70s, but she did an Ironman. So, yeah, I think it's really important in life to have goals going forward. I love people who have bucket lists and things like that. In fact, I really want to start one for myself. But how I do my bucket list now is the minute something crosses my mind that I want to do, I just book it. So this year I've been watching amazing choir competitions on YouTube, and I suddenly decided I'm going to go to Llangollen in Wales to go to the Eisteddfod. I've always heard of Eisteddfods. So in the middle of the night, I jumped up and I went and booked it. So I don't wait, until the feeling goes away. I actually just just jump into gear and book things. So I really am a person. I want to die with my last check bouncing and having just done everything in life that I've ever thought would be a great thing to be able to do. I'm very good with money, so I never waste money. I'm not stingy at all. I genuinely, I hope everyone thinks I'm a generous person, but I don't waste money. So, the wonderful thing is, by salting away a massive part of my salary every month for many years, I can afford to do, pretty much anything I want to do. I will have the money to do it. And, obviously I thank Graham every time because I'm thinking I'm spending two people's retirement money, not just my own. So every time I do something, I say, thanks, my love. Thanks for allowing me to do this. He was a massive saver as well. I say, thank you for putting all that money aside so that I can, live my dreams.
I keep thinking that. I don't know if this is just ridiculous, but with like the numbers that you've said, I'm 100 miler. I know you've run like two 56-mile ultramarathons. Would you ever want to do 100 miler?
Honestly, Sarah, no. That is a very, very, no is a complete sentence. No, I've run with people. Many of my friends in the 100 Marathon Club have done 100 milers and they just casually mention it. There's a woman who wrote a book called Just Run called Merrily Freer. And she went from, running in lockdown to running a 100 miler. I saw the video footage of her finishing. I mean, she was still running at an angle because she was so tired, side angle. She was bent not forwards, but to the side. And I just thought, Merrily, I take my hat off to you because I don't think I would finish anyway. I would be on my hands and knees. No, I think less is more now. As I'm older, I want my body to hold out into, well into my 80s and 90s because I'm not a naturally talented runner. My favorite expression is I am an example of tenacity over a lack of talent, the triumph of tenacity over a lack of talent. I'm not a natural runner. I do get a lot of niggles. My physio loves me because, I'm always in there. And I want to preserve my body as much as possible. And I have unfortunately seen quite a few people my age having to have hip replacements and knee replacements. And that's just not something I want in my future. So I'm treating my body with respect. I don't think I'm biomechanically meant to run because I've always been the slowest. I mean, something we haven't mentioned is I've come last in 25 marathons. That's my USP is coming last. So I'm not naturally talented. I don't think my body was built to run. I mean, I think I'm one of those rare humans who wasn't born to run, but I do it anyway. But no, that's a hard no.
That's a hard no. Thank you for being so honest. I really I appreciate it. Lisa, how can people connect with you? How can they buy their books? Where are you most active on social media? Where should they find you to follow along?
Well, on social media, my favorite platform is Facebook. I know that's old school now, but I only got onto Facebook, relatively recently compared to everyone else. So on Facebook, I'm Lisa Flamingo Jackson. On Instagram, which is a new platform for me, I'm Lisa Flamingo Jackson as well. And on X, I'm Lisa Jackson 43. And I just wanted to say as well that we talked a lot about death and tears, but my book has loads of funny sections in it. Everyone's commented on that. So it's a book with light and dark. It's not a sob fest the whole way through. There's a lot of sad stuff in the book, I'll be honest. But if you buy my book, you'll find that there's a chapter which is hilarious on my efforts at going online dating and speed dating. There's also many funny, things that happened during Graham's cancer journey and things that I did with my dad. I mean, one day I was trying to take his menu order in the care home, and I asked him if he wanted tiramisu or fruit salad for lunch as a dessert, and he said, "Terrorist soup? Terrorist soup? What's that? I've never heard of it." And I was like, "Not terrorist soup, Dad, tiramisu." We'd never heard of that either. But there's just moments like that I've managed to capture in the book. So if anyone's wary of reading my book because they think it might just be too sad and too overwhelming, it's definitely not written that way, because that isn't how life is. Like, even in the face of terminal cancer, there are many, many funny things that happen and many joyful things that happen, and it makes you appreciate life even more. So there's a lot of life in this book as well as a lot of death.
Lisa, I'd love for you to share your final words of advice, final words of wisdom for other women out there who are maybe going through something similar. Just top tips and advice that maybe you wish that you'd heard, many years ago. What would you like to say?
Firstly, I'd like to say start every run with a 5-minute walk. I never had time for warm-ups before, and I just realized it meant that running from cold really was much more challenging than it needed to be. So I now go for my 5-minute walk, and I always tell myself, Lisa, if you don't feel like running today, you can come home without running. All you have to do is walk home. So that would mean a 10-minute walk, which is better than nothing. So I'd say a 5-minute warm-up is essential. And I'd say don't let go of running. Don't let it disappear, fall off the bottom of your to-do list. See it as a joy. See it as an opportunity to give yourself me time. Make it as fun as you possibly can. Find a running buddy. Listen to great podcasts like this one. Just enjoy yourself and have a reward waiting for you at the end, such as the kettle being filled already, a tea bag in your mug, so you've got a hug in the mug to come back to after you've been outdoors. I really regret, I don't like living my life with regrets, but I really regret not running more when Graham was ill. And I would say to everyone, just remember, a 10-minute run will make you feel like a new person, whereas a 2-hour, 5-hour walk is never going to make you feel quite as good as that. So 10 minutes, everybody's got 10 minutes. If you think about how much time we spend doom scrolling or watching, Love Island or whatever people watch on TV, my personal guilty pleasures or things like Below Deck, that is a full hour. Everybody's got that 10 minutes. And I would just urge everyone to just remember that running can be your salvation too.
Lisa, thank you so much for coming on the Tough Girl podcast to share more of your story and to share just so many tips and amazing pieces of advice, and also the lessons that you've learned with the journey that you've been on. And thank you for sharing your story and your words in your latest book, Still Running After All These Tears. I'll make sure I include all of the links to everything that you've shared in the notes. But thank you again for coming on the Tough Girl podcast.
Oh, it's such a pleasure, Sarah.
Hey, tribe. How are we all doing? Big shout out to all the runners who are listening to this while they're outside doing their long, slow runs. I really, really appreciate you listening to the Tough Girl podcast, and fantastic to listen to Lisa. What an incredible story. What an absolute inspiration. Please do go and follow Lisa on social media. Please do go check out her book as well. I've written an in-depth book review as well on toughgirlchallenges.com. So please do go and check it out. Now, if you are training for your first marathon, if you visit toughgirlchallenges.com, in the resources section, there is a section dedicated for runners up to a marathon distance. And I've spoken to a lot of women all about running from different perspectives. We've spoken with Bethan Taylor Swain. She's a PhD candidate and feminist sociologist of sports, studying representation and identities of women in ultramarathons with a passion for diversity and inclusion in running. We have spoken with India Cook, who shares more about going from a runner to a run coach, her journey of making running a more diverse, inclusive and less intimidating place. She's advocating for all paces and body types in the space of road running. We have spoken with Carrie Wallace, which you may know. She's the founder and mountain leader of Girls on Hills, Skyrunner, Fell Runner, and Ultra Runner, encouraging more women to hit the trails and venture into the mountains, shouting about equity and inclusivity in trail running. We have also chatted with Julie Wise, who's known as the Marathon Goddess, 52 marathons in 52 weeks for pancreatic cancer and creating a legacy of hope. We've spoken with Hildy, who's known as the Marathon Woman, 366, running 366 marathons in a year at age 55 to break a Guinness World Record. We've also spoken to Helen River, who shares more about running through grief, finding strength and breaking records. She ran 1,000 consecutive half marathons, and she's out there inspiring others to be the best. So there's lots of different stories. There's lots of women sharing their stories, giving you advice and tips to help you with your running journey. Now, if you are looking for some new running trainers, new running kits, I work with a brand called Innovate, INOV8.com, and you can use the discount code ToughGirl15, ToughGirl, TOUGH, girl, GIRL, 15 to get a 15% discount. So if the items are already discounted, you don't get a discount on top of that. But if they're not in sale, for example, and you're looking to get some new running gear, some new gym gear, some new hiking gear, then if you visit the website, you can order online. Go and check out their trainers, go and check out their running backpacks, their jackets, their trousers, their leggings. But that's a good discount for you. 15% off, Tough Girl 15. Thank you again for listening to the Tough Girl podcast. All that's left for me to say is, wherever you are, whatever you are doing, give it your all, give it 110%, get after it, go for it, believe in yourself, because I believe in you. Take care, lots of love, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.